Brian, and others can answer this too, but I want to get directly to the CDMOs. Uh, Virtual, lean, emerging biotechs, few people. Some may not be as experienced as you would like. Some are, um, and the model is the CDMO is going to take care of stuff for us, find the right one, and work with them. Uh, so how much can you rely on? Can you like nearly fully, if you're a real virtual company, rely on your CDMO to guide, lead, and advance your CMC to submission and to bring it to where it needs to be and work with the regulatory authorities, et cetera, et cetera?
I would say you probably can, but at the same time, I'd also say you absolutely shouldn't. um, I have worked with companies as small as 2 people, and we've worked with some of the top 5 pharma companies in the world. And when you're dealing with small companies, yes, they rarely have the expertise, and the first thing that they want to rely on the CDMO for is quality system. You know, and you can't. At the end of the day, you have to sign off on releasing those batches. I think Joanne earlier mentioned that issue, and I have companies that have phase 3, even soon to be hopefully commercial, that they are, in my opinion, relying way too heavily on the CDMO's quality systems. They have, in some cases, even phase 2 candidates when the sponsor company has 3 SOPs that they're following. They have no vendor selection or qualification SOPs. They have no quality systems audits in place. You're getting into the later stages of the product, and you need to have these things in place because you don't get to delegate that responsibility. So the CDMO loves to have it all because, everybody has their own motivations and goals, and theirs is to make money and hold your hand and hold on to that project as long as possible. Because at some point, most projects will either fail and they'll lose the project, so they want to milk it for all they can, or it will be tech transferred out when it's licensed to a new company or it just outgrows you. So some of the CDMOs are out there to squeeze what they can out of it. And when you do ultimately, hopefully, get to that point of having to tech transfer to a larger facility, you have a lot of complicated 3-way agreements, and sometimes the transferring party doesn't want to work as quickly as you need them to on the transfer. So I don't think there is a second option for you having to internalize and maintain all of the intellectual property, the know-how, the knowledge, and be able to backstop everything. You cannot rely on your CDMO to do that for you.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I'd like to jump in. I think what Brian said is correct. You shouldn't rely on them too much. When you're going through drug development, you're still developing specifications, you're still learning about your project, your product, right? And a lot of the decisions you make are risk-based, right? And you as a sponsor, right, have to make those decisions, right? You as the sponsor, you understand, you have a clinical team, a medical team, right, who can help you make those decisions. You can't outsource that. You can outsource them getting information for you, but the big decisions have to remain internal.
Joanne, were you going to say something? I think you might have been on mute there a second.
Yes. No, I was going to say I completely agree with the points that were made. And I think, first of all, there's very, very few CDMOs that can act completely independently because they have the entire, soup to nuts, the entire workforce. In other words, they have a lot of capabilities, mostly development capabilities versus just manufacturing. But then even they require input. They cannot make the decision about, especially about risks. I noticed in one of the questions was about using stable pools for first in human versus the final clone and a clonal master cell bank. That is a decision that carries risk with it, and therefore the CDMO is not going to make the decision for you. So you have to understand what the risks are and what the technical challenges are, and update on your entire strategy, because now you're talking about comparability and so on and so forth. So you really need to be very much engaged. The other thing I wanted to mention is there's very few, hardly any, with the exception, I think, of Wuxi Biologics. There's really not a lot of CDMOs out there that are end-to-end. So you have to do cell line development in one CDMO, and MCB manufacturing, all the testing gets outsourced. And then drug substance is done one place, drug product is done another place. That's the process development. And then manufacturing sometimes is not co-located with process development capabilities. So there is no CDMO that will handle that for you. You have to have the capability to oversee all these little, let's call them supply chain nodes, all these nodes, and make sure that not just from the technical perspective, which is critical, technical quality and supply chain and timelines are all working together to deliver clinical trial material. So, yeah.
Ben, yeah, thanks. Ben, I see you shaking your head. I mean, with all the marketing and advertising I see from CDMOs saying that they are end-to-end nuts and bolts and they can do everything, you agree with Joanne? They actually can't?
No, I mean, I think it's, as Joanne said, it's pretty rare that you see, that kind of full end-to-end, sort of function really kind of play out in practice, especially when you're talking about going from kind of clinical stage to commercial stage. I think that's where you see a big, shift oftentimes in capabilities. And, I can just add on to kind of some of the risk that plays in comes into play. But, just for one example, in cases such as China, there are actually, sort of strict requirements that do not allow for export of API out of China, manufacturing of drug product, and then reimportation of that drug product into China. And so this is where something like if you had developed your supply chain around that with the assumption of a certain, CMO in place, that their ability to manage drug product in China, and then found out late stage that they couldn't do that or weren't going to be able to do it to the scale that you wanted to do, you'd be in a really tight space because you wouldn't be able to supply that region. So, this is where I think supply chain projection is such an important piece of it, and looking at it not just from the standpoint of, what they can do technically, but also, what they can do in the context of your regulatory strategy as well.